Hello and welcome. This is the Daily Dharma. My name's Dina. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I am feeling just a little bit rushed with the reading this today, so I hope you'll bear with me. I did lay out a couple of oracle cards first while we were setting the tone and intention during the pre-shuffle, and I have two cards from the Kali deck. The first one is 38, comma of Kali, and the second one is 42, Kali Kalmasa Nasini, I believe. Forgive my pronunciations. So I do enjoy looking these up. The Kali deck is something I'm not as familiar with. And the Kama of Kali, to me, strikes me as a gesture, someone presenting a flower to another, or someone who has picked up a flower and is really appreciating and taking it in their senses, and perhaps some time to sit and reflect. It's like thinking of the emotions that go through while we're sitting in a nice blooming garden and taking in our surroundings, perhaps on the heels of needing something to settle down from, right? Especially with this four-armed goddess, warrior goddess, that has her arrow raised up high above her head, bow down below. It's as though she's just like four-handed, getting ready to bring the bow around and get it all set up to potentially shoot. It's like a poised position. And even on her hand, I'm just realizing there's some kind of an image. It looks like it's part of a twig or something. There's some of those drawn in the background on the bottom. But look at the upraised hand there. It almost looks like a tattoo or some henna or something like that. But the first impression I got was actually blood splatter. On the symbolic level, I do hope, based on like being in the midst of a battle. And with that yellow background, it strikes me as something that has required us or trained us somewhat to respond from a place of being in that flight or flight mode. And it seems like somebody who has learned perhaps the hard way or the long way that you do need to have your defenses up. And I always love to bring up one of my favorite quotes is, better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And it seems that many of us are born here in this soft, vulnerable soul expression that then becomes hardened because of the battlefield of life in whatever form that's come down the pipeline to us each. And then having the moment, that difficult transition, then reflecting in and amongst one's own personal garden, even if you're not a gardener. It's the sacred space that we connect with, your hobbies, your passions, your meditation or envisioning space, and being able to bring context to those. So in the book, though, 38, this flower, comma of Kali, talks about the sweetness of life and how that any of us who are kind of doing our part to heal and also to connect with pleasure in general is as a path of personal empowerment with the intention to bring spiritual benefit to the collective through softening and opening your heart is an act of worshiping the divine feminine. Relax into the presence of what is as you slow your pace and make swifter progress. It's talking about that, the first opening line I skipped too. She's utterly and completely in love with your divine essence, and in her love, bestows endless gifts. Your path need not be one of endless effort. So it's as though the hard part was more in uh, so I had a glorious long conversation with one of my friends earlier today, and we were talking about how at the beginning we're some of us conditioned to work hard or to behave in certain patterns based on the usually our family of origin and their surrounding stories, the karmic legacy, if you will. And so many of us get caught up in the efforting, either needing validation or needing to work until we're ready to drop for need for validation or for somebody to say, yes, you've done enough for today, you've earned your pellet. It's like, um, but what does that actually serve except depleting? And then there's not that light to share forward in the same way. Um, so moving on, number 42 here. She devours darkness with her endless hunger for light, peace, and redemption. She reaches the deepest places, the darkest spaces, relentless in her pursuit of the lost and despairing. No soul shall ever be forgotten, abandoned, or betrayed by her. Those that believe in their own guilt, their sin, their shame, evoke her mighty tenderness as she feasts upon the darkness that threatens to consume them, alleviating the weight of their suffering, allowing their hearts to become light and free. So it's talking about how those of us that this is resonating with, that we were hardened up in a certain way, but there is this sacred softening that perhaps we've been working through on our own during our healing process that has allowed us to be somewhat of a warrior of the light. And with the second card talking about devouring sin, it's as though this is all part of that rising up and almost correcting the karma of the legacy we were born into or placed within, as part of our redemption story. And so this can lead to a lot of course, defensiveness. But now with this softening, there's, I believe, also that urge to be super protective over those that we witness, that we see, and that see us, and the underrepresented, the marginalized, the outcast, and those who are struggling to emerge from their darkness despite what they have tried and tried. They can't wash the blood off their hands. There's that Macbeth out damn spot or something. I don't know if that's meaningful for anybody. It came in quite randomly for me. I also wanted to read the next part of this just because if anybody's seen The Fifth Element, it's classic. So the name Kali Kalamasa Nasini translate as she who consumes sin. She destroys ill intent. She eradicates mistakes. Here is Kali as the supreme divine weapon. She is the archer and the arrow. She is the divine mind unleashed, so it shall raise anything built on negative foundations, and who vanquishes all evil. Hers is the power of, there's this word, Pashupatrasta, straw? This is a Sanskrit word which refers to the ultimate spiritual weapon, capacity to neutralize every other weapon in the universe. And it can be unleashed in a number of ways. So whether this power is delivered by this arrow, a sword, release of a thought, even a negative self-speak, a glance, a sound from the divine mind, its action is unequivocal and swift. In the blink of an eye, something once considered as solid as rock is reduced to nothing. And so this is almost like, be mindful and aware of the extraordinary, powerful nature of every glance and every look. You are changing the world, no matter how meek and small you may still feel. Your impact is felt like the flutter of a butterfly's wings. The chaos theory is that those who deal with chaos in their responsiveness really impact everything at a global scale. We're connected to all that is. And then we also have some Tao Te Ching messages laid out. I only intended for one to come out, but they always come out in multiples. So bear with me here. Number 52 was on the bottom of the deck. In the beginning was the Tao. All things issue from it, all things return to it. To find the origin, trace back the manifestations. When you recognize the children and find the mother, you will be free of sorrow. If you close your mind in judgments and traffic with desires, your heart will be troubled. If you keep your mind from judging and aren't led by the senses, your heart will find peace. Seeing into darkness is clarity. Knowing how to yield is strength. Use your own light and return to the source of light. This is called practicing eternity. So there's something about both the earthly karmic legacy with our family, perhaps. Many of us are identified with being those who are working through some type of patterning within our family, and thus identifying also to some extent with some type of scapegoat, black sheep, or outcast, or the one who's different, the alienated, the overlooked. So just a couple things here. I try not to get into these so much, but there's so much within them. So talking about this in the beginning is the Tao. If it suits your beliefs and your ideas better, go ahead and stick in God or source. All of this unity consciousness, it's all that ocean. And then finding the origin story or whatever else. It's like we can look at somebody's complaints and we can estimate a good deal about their fears and sadness, and in that brings a huge responsibility to the collective, in that way. And I was seeing this in my mind's eye as there's this one weed in the garden. I don't know what it's really called. One of my coworkers calls it artillery weed or something, and it shoots up. It's a kind of a pretty flower, and it has all these little bitty flowers, which are seed heads. And then when it's ready, if you touch it, it just, and it literally sprays these things as far as you can imagine. And so finding the babies all over the place, the children, is great. We can pull them, but in all the seeds, like if you want to pick up 52 seeds, that's great. But if we find the plant that is the big one that keeps spraying its seeds, then we're that much closer. So it's like tracing back those tap roots within the family. Like, okay, let's say my mom or my dad made me feel a certain way about myself. Well, not to excuse or to tolerate the intolerable, but if I can trace that back, I can understand on a different level how that origin story became passed down to me with perhaps good, bad, and indifferent intent. Lack of mindfulness, perhaps. Toxicity, perhaps. But all of this is talking about knowing those things is only so-called half the battle. So if we're able, or if we end up closing our mind to the judgmental nature of they should have, would have, could have done better, yeah, but that limits the our ability to heal beyond that. Now, what do we do with that? So, how do we untrouble the heart? We try to keep our mind from judging, and we try to not get caught up in the defensiveness of, oh, I've smelled that before. That look reminds me of this other individual. Then we're able to also remove ourselves from those addictive patterns that are like, if we really need connection with other individuals, it's better to find an individual that we can connect with and groups that we can identify with on the values level than it is to seek communities at a distance beyond the veil, such as what we're doing here, right? And there's so much more that can be gleaned from that one-on-one, or the real peopling behind it. So that's part of the healing. Moving on, number 77, 3 of them popped out. As it acts in the world, the Tao is like the bending of a bow. The top is bent downward, the bottom is bent up. It adjusts excess and deficiency so that there is a perfect balance. It takes from what is too much and gives to what isn't enough. Those who try to control, who use force to protect their power, go against the direction of the Tao. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have far too much. The master can keep giving because there's no end to her wealth. She acts without expectation, succeeds without taking credit, and doesn't think that she is better than anyone else. So this may be coming up. It's like character development, the actualization and embodiment of integrity. It speaks so loudly for itself when we can stop operating from that reactionary, where something just triggers us in the moment. There may be always triggers for some of us, less so for others. But sometimes it's in that, like they talk about how if you throw a frog into boiling water, it'll jump out. But if you put it in the water and then you raise the temp slowly over time, the frog doesn't know until it's beyond its capacity and it's now dead or food. And that's kind of the way some of our energy that is misguided comes upon us. It comes slowly over time, over conditions, over the need to cope or to respond. And suddenly, maybe we're taking a drink every day and we don't quite feel that that's in alignment with where we want to go. Or maybe we're starting to judge other individuals where before we would be more letting things roll off our backs, depending on whatever, or there's a time and a place for everything. So there's something about this development of self, and that when we're not keeping score, when we're open, when we're operating from the heart space here, not trying to control, get validated, or protect ourselves so that others can't gain the upper hand on us, there's something that's coming through with that softening process where we're going to be gifted along some lines. I don't want to say like we're going to win the lotto, but maybe we will. I don't want to say we're not. Number 63, act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as the large and the few as the many. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. The master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her. So yeah, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. That's a silly saying. I don't know where that one's coming from, but it's like every small act, every gesture makes a difference. Every thing that we say about or to ourselves has leverage. I've spoken with people before where they're like, oh, don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, I'm so stupid. And those are very overt self-deprecating remarks that accumulate. And it ends up being, I'm so sorry, but not sorry. It's not funny because you're worth more, right? And even myself, I've been corrected by one of my colleagues when I say, oh, I don't really know. And she said her dad always corrected her and said, what we should say is, well, I'm not sure, but I believe, or I think, or I know that, fill in the blank. Instead of I don't know, but we should say I know that, right? Because we're accepting that that level of value. So that's for somebody. 36. Oh, 63 and 36. If you want to shrink something, you first must allow it to expand. If you want to get rid of something, you must first allow it to flourish. If you want to take something, you must first allow it to be given. This is called subtle perception of the way things are. The soft overcomes the hard. The slow overcomes the fast. Tortoise and the hare. Let your workings remain a mystery. Just show the people the results. So speaking of your garden and that crazy weed, it's like, who can go out there and find every tiny little seed after it just sprayed everywhere? They're too tiny. You can't do it. So if you want to get rid of the weeds in your garden, you first must kind of wait to let them evident themselves by sprouting and germinating. And then you can see all the tiny little ones. And every small one that you pull is the potential of 5 million seed pods saved, right? And so in the same way, when somebody's, my friend called it pressing on the bruise earlier, when somebody presses on your bruise, like, oh, well, how's that boyfriend? Still a pile of crap or something like that. You could be like, why would they want to insinuate something? And I'm sorry, I don't mean that this is a comment about myself. That was not something that came out. In case any ears are listening. But yeah, being able to see what somebody is saying before we assume, to not have somebody try to put words in our mouth, not to let somebody kind of poke at us when they know that there's a soft spot there, or that we said something that could have been misconstrued. And now we wonder, have they told 50 people something that wasn't based in reality? It's like sometimes we kind of need to allow things to bounce back to us, to show themselves in the mirror of like sometimes when somebody will speak and then the other person's like, why would you say that? Then it's like, oh, what did I say? Because I didn't think that I said that thing that you thought I said, because you wouldn't have taken it this way. There's that clarity moment. So also in that way, if you want to shrink your shadow, if you want to shrink your wounds, your suffering, then at first it takes leaning into, it takes sitting down in the garden and taking those small steps to encounter the shadow, those small steps to, if your goal is to quit drinking, quit smoking, or to eat healthier, or get more exercise, setting small realistic goals for yourself is so much faster to reach your goal than to say, oh, well, I'm gonna absolutely stop this, and I'm gonna start good luck making it past week 1. Even with the height of discipline, you'll still be somewhat miserable because it feels regimented. It feels like rules and restriction and repression. It's like to allow the pleasures. It's like if we need to correct our addiction to sugar, then maybe a segue would be to start to appreciate the beautiful, succulent deliciousness of natural fruit flavors, if you can do that. Um, Somehow receiving something that you can really truly enjoy instead of feeling like you're depriving yourself makes it much easier. And this is reminding me of when I was pregnant the first few months. Everybody around me was still, drinking and having a fun time hanging out. And so I started making myself just a little hangout mocktail, a little fun beverage that felt like I was getting a little treat. But those calories did add up, I will tell you that. So it wasn't maybe the healthiest choice, but it was one choice that for me kind of helped me to reach across into the next leg of the journey at that time. Getting Merkaba and crown chakra on the split, an expansion of the mind space. So as your vibration rises, as you become centered and embodied, and non-judgmental, as we're seeing here in the card, suggesting that it's like the mind opens wide up, and then we can perceive of many more possibilities and potentials. Prosperity in Merkaba. Ooh, I'd like to see the prosperity increase on my end. And of course, prosperity can be all types of things, but let's just talk about abundance in general. Whatever we look at or expand upon, whatever we focus on, tends to grow. And so prosperity is linked to abundance, is linked to focus. And where our attention goes, that energy grows. Many have heard that type of saying. Magic and universal love here. Let's go with that. Okay, so first one, root chakra, remaining balanced and grounded. I believe also that one of the best ways to handle a sense of disconnection or separation energy in your life is to just really sit with the breath and the body, and if you can, do a little bit of light stretching, maybe some type of cleansing ritual, and even hygiene is a cleansing and self-care ritual. I mean, not many of us are avid at flossing and doing all of those things, right? There's ways to really appreciate and honor the body that may be overlooked or undervalued. And it's like, how can we spend our time if we're not doing that one thing that we don't want to do? A grounding practice here is to, like I said, to create some type of a value add practice that becomes a better behavior. And so thought precedes taking action. And just as if we want to get into a habit or a routine, it needs to start with those tiny steps. And every time that we do it, it needs to happen for a certain amount of time before we create that habit, and before that habit becomes a ritual, and before it becomes a life practice. So getting back into our spiritual practice. Oh, miracle. Yeah, we're being told to ground our energies, because coming in very quickly here, once we get ourselves stabilized from whatever has rocked our world, and in our new beginnings, there's something breaking through here for us, some new thing birthing forward. And it might have to do with a passionate new beginning, either a career transition, an environmental transition of relationship, but it's the way that we use our passionate spark sparkly energy. I'm just going to split this, I guess, into 3. I thought I was going to do 2. We have magic still on the bottom there, change here, and discernment. And I'm putting those under those 3 cards. So root chakra is where the magic's at. The miracle is coming down through this new change, whatever we're grounding now or committing to change in our lives. And passion with discernment, how we utilize our passionate energies. And something else I wanted to just bring up, it was about one of these Tao cards. When we find ourselves speaking any type of a way about ourselves or imagining, have you ever gone through scenarios in your head looking forward to, or I should have said such and such, or rehashing something that happened and having these thoughts about, oh, well, maybe I was awkward or cringy, or maybe they thought this, that, or the other thing about me. It's like we can, what I do is a pattern interrupt that I developed years ago where I start to hum. I don't know why that was the thing that worked for me, but it's like pinching yourself awake. It's like recognition that there's a negative dialogue going on, and I say, that is not true. That is being manifested in my mind, and I know, and I release that negative intention, and I admit and am aware that that is not the case, that this is the case. And I give myself some type of affirmation, a true affirmation, not something blowing smoke or love bombing. Nobody needs all that. All right, vibrational right there coming out. Vibrational, we'll put that over root magic. It's a vibration thing. It's the core frequency, like that integrity. It speaks for itself. So does our base level frequency. So if you're always talking bad about yourself, if you're always talking bad of others, then this comes down the pipeline and it sits as judgments and critique and criticism. It's not discernment, it's judgment at that point. And I think that those of us on this path have done a lot of work in bringing our vibration up the scale. And it's not that low times will not call us. It's not that from even lengths of time can call us back into worse habits. Like I'm off the healthy eating campaign now, but I have committed, I'm back on there. So maybe that's why you're all listening to this message today. But I think that it is a powerful time of change following the eclipses. And now with that Jupiter and Uranus conjunction where it's like, I'm ready for the change. I'm ready to spin this my own way. And now with Scorpio full moon, we're releasing and full speed ahead. 2 more if we can get them in. Contact under miracle change. Might be a chance meeting for some. And fairy magic under the discernment of our passion. So don't get lost in the other realms or comfort zones or into your comforting, self-soothing behaviors. It's going to take some confidence and courage to bring ourselves up full force, but we're ready for this change. So embrace it. You got this. And check back for more messages later. Take care, guys.